Okay, trigonometry is when you are looking for sides or even angles of a right triangle. It only works if you have a right triangle. And so we're going to start with basic trig, which is given just one side and one angle, you could find everything else in the triangle that you need. So the words that we're going to be using are sine, cosine, and tangent. This is how they are abbreviated when you write them, and that's how they will look on your calculator. But you'll still say sine, cosine, and tangent. And those are just the trig ratios that we will use. So when you're looking at the sine, that's dealing with the opposite leg and the hypotenuse. So this all depends on the angle. So if you have the sine of angle A, what that means is that you're putting the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. Well, if you're looking at angle A, the opposite leg is the one directly across from it. That would be A. And the hypotenuse is going to be the one across from a right angle, which is B. So that's how you would set that up. Now in a regular problem, you would have numbers there or a variable. You wouldn't have two letters. So then when you're dealing with cosine of A, that's adjacent leg, which is the one that's right next to the angle. The angle is always made up of two sides. One will always be the hypotenuse, and one will always be the adjacent leg. The one that doesn't touch it is opposite. So for adjacent, you'd put C over, the hypotenuse is B. Then the tangent of A is opposite leg over the adjacent leg. So opposite was A, adjacent is C. So all of these except the hypotenuse will change if the angle changes. So now if we're dealing with C, this is still the hypotenuse, but now this becomes the adjacent leg and this becomes the opposite leg. So the sine of C is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite of C is C, hypotenuse is B. The cosine of C is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, which would be A over B. And then the tangent will be the opposite over the adjacent, which is C over A. And I'll show you what this means in a second, but right now I'm just showing you how to set them up. So this is how you remember that. We use SOHCAHTOA a lot, and what that means is, well, this is sine, this is cosine, and this is tangent. And sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Oh, I forgot my T. There we go. It's very important that when you do this, your calculator is in degree mode. It defaults to radian. So you need to hit the mode button, scroll down where it says radian, you'll scroll over to degree and hit enter. If you don't do that, you will never get the right answer. So it's very important. Okay, so when you're setting up these problems, the first thing you will do is write down an acute angle. Now these will always be right triangles. You will never use the 90-degree angle. It will always be one of the two acute angles, and it doesn't matter which one you use. Then the second thing you decide on is what trig ratio you're dealing with. Now that will either be sine, cosine, or tangent. Sorry. Then you will have one side of the triangle over another side of the triangle. So first thing we write down is our acute angle. I'm just going to use the 47. There are two acute angles, but since we don't know this one, we'd have to figure it out. It's just easier to use what we're given. Now remember, the two sides that make up the angle, my tracing's terrible here, these two sides make up this 47-degree angle. One of those will always be the hypotenuse, which is the one across from the right angle. The other one will always be adjacent. So the one not touching it, the one that's not highlighted, that would always be opposite. So we have the hypotenuse, and we need the adjacent. So we're dealing with A and H. So which of our trig ratios deals with A and H? A and H are cosine. So you go back here, you put cosine right here. Cosine of 47 is, then it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So you'd put x over 12. Now you might want to write this down somewhere. If the variable is on top, you're going to multiply. That's just an algebra rule because we have to isolate the variable. So if you multiply, that will cancel out and you're just left with x here. So in your calculator, you would type 12 times the cosine of 47. And you will type it just like that and get 8.2 once you round it. Now, if you get anything bigger than 12, that should be a big sign that something's wrong because 12 is the hypotenuse, that would be the longest side. Okay, here we have the acute angle of 41. This is the hypotenuse. This would be opposite. This would be adjacent. So opposite and adjacent means you are doing the tangent because tangent is opposite over adjacent. Now I want to write this down too. If the variable is on bottom, you do what I call switch and divide. That's terrible handwriting, sorry. So this is just solving an equation, but if you just switch these two completely, you will be able to solve that in your calculator. Otherwise, you'd have to multiply by c and then divide by tangent of 41. So if you can just memorize that step, it'll save you some time. So in your calculator, you type 17 divided by the tangent of 41, and you get 19.5562, blah, blah, blah. I would put 19.6. Now, there's a third example on your notes. We will cover that in the next lesson, so just skip over that and go to the bottom. And there are 3 at the bottom. I would like you to try by yourself, but if you just want to watch me do them, you can do that. So we have 39 as our acute angle, so you write that down first. Then you got to decide on your trig ratio. We've got the opposite side and the adjacent side. Now, this is the hypotenuse, but that's not what we're looking for, nor is it the one we're given, so it's not useful. So opposite and adjacent is tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. And when the variable's on bottom, you switch and divide. So you get x equals 14 divided by the tangent of 39. And you get 17.3. Feel free to pause this if you need more time with that. So our acute angle is 52. We have the adjacent side is what we're looking for, and we have the hypotenuse. So that is cosine. And cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. When the variable's on top, you multiply by the denominator. So in your calculator, you type 15 cosine 52, and that would give you your answer. And you get 9.2. And for the last one, you have your angle. This is opposite. This is hypotenuse. So you write down your acute angle. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And you don't have to memorize these. These are all on your formula chart. They're on the wall in my room. And hopefully if you can remember SOHCAHTOA, then you'd always have it. So variable is on top, so you multiply by the denominator, 17. So you type 17 sine of 61 in your calculator. And I believe this is going to get something fun. Let me make sure. Oh no, this is a different one. It's not fun at all. Just a boring old 14.9. Ah, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. And that's all there is to it.